6-year-old Lily Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack vanished from their rural home in Nova Scotia during their mother's morning routine, leaving their family devastated and an entire community searching desperately for answers. But nearly 3 years earlier, a shocking family secret had torn their world apart when their biological father made a decision that would haunt everyone involved. And now investigators are wondering if this hidden truth holds the key to understanding what really happened to these two innocent children. The small community of Lansdowne Station sits nestled in the heart of Pictou County, Nova Scotia, roughly 140 kilometers northeast of Halifax. This sparsely populated area is characterized by dense woodlands, winding rural roads, and the kind of peaceful isolation that many families seek when they want to raise their children away from the hustle and bustle of city life. It was here, on Gairloch Road, that 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack called home. Their modest dwelling sat surrounded by thick forests that stretched for miles in every direction, creating a natural code playground that most children would find irresistible. The towering trees, fallen logs from previous storms, and winding trails offered endless opportunities for exploration and adventure. Lily, with her distinctive brown hair and charming gap between her front teeth, was known throughout the community as a bright and talkative child. Her grandmother would later describe her as a little dream girl who could strike up conversations with anyone she met. Despite being on the autism spectrum, Lily was remarkably social and had an infectious personality that drew people to her. Her younger brother Jack, also on the autism spectrum, possessed a more serious demeanor that seemed unusual for a child his age. Even as a baby, family members recalled how he would study people with an intensity that was both endearing and slightly unsettling. Where Lily was outgoing and animated, Jack was thoughtful and observant, creating a perfect balance between the siblings. The children lived with their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, and her partner, Daniel Martell, along with their 1-year-old half-sister, Meadow. This blended family had been working to build a stable life together in their rural sanctuary, far from the complications and drama that had marked their earlier years. The house itself bordered directly onto the heavily wooded area that would later become the focus of one of Nova Scotia's most intensive search operations. The property featured a sliding back door that opened onto their yard, providing easy access to the outdoor spaces where Lily and Jack loved to play. The door was known to open silently, a detail that would become crucial in understanding the events that unfolded. Lansdowne Station's remote location meant that neighbors were few and far between. The nearest houses sat considerable distances away, and the rural roads saw minimal traffic throughout most days. This isolation provided privacy and tranquility for families seeking a quiet life. But it also meant that if something went wrong, help could be far away. The community itself was tight-knit, with residents looking out for one another and their children. Local schools served multiple small communities, and everyone generally knew everyone else's business. It was the type of place where children could play outside without constant supervision, where doors were often left unlocked, and where the biggest concerns typically involved wildlife encounters rather than human threats. However, beneath this peaceful exterior, the Sullivan family carried secrets that few people in the community fully understood. The children's family situation was more complicated than most neighbors realized, involving a biological father who had chosen to completely remove himself from their lives years earlier, custody battles that had left deep wounds, and a grandmother who had been cut off from her grandchildren for nearly 2 years before their disappearance. On the surface, Malaya Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell appeared to have created the ideal family environment for Lily and Jack. Martell had stepped into the role of stepfather with apparent dedication, helping to provide stability for the children after the turmoil of their mother's previous relationship. The couple had welcomed baby Meadow into their home, creating what seemed like a complete family unit. Daily life in the Sullivan household followed predictable routines that provided structure for the children. Lily attended Salt Springs Elementary School, where she was known as a friendly and engaged student. Jack, being younger, spent his days at home with his mother and baby sister, looking forward to the times when Lily would return with exciting tales from her school adventures. The children were described by those who knew them as happy and well-adjusted, despite their autism spectrum diagnoses. Contrary to some stereotypes about children with autism, both Lily and Jack were remarkably social and communicative. Their mother would later emphasize that they would talk your ear off and were happy kids who talked to everyone. Their daily activities included playing in the yard under supervision, exploring the immediate area around their home, and engaging in typical sibling interactions. The family took regular trips into nearby New Glasgow for shopping and errands, creating opportunities for the children to interact with the broader community. The morning of May 2nd, 2025, began like any other day in the Sullivan household. Maleha woke early to tend to baby Meadow, while Daniel prepared for his own daily activities. The sliding back door remained closed, and the children were still sleeping when their parents began their morning routines. As the morning progressed, Maleha found herself focused on caring for 1-year-old Meadow, who required constant attention and supervision. This was a familiar juggling act for any parent with multiple children of different ages, particularly when one child was still an infant requiring frequent feeding and care. Daniel Martell was also present in the home that morning, helping with household activities and preparing for his day. The family dynamic seemed normal and unremarkable, with no indication that this particular morning would be any different from countless others that had preceded it. The children's bedroom was located within the main part of the house, and their parents could typically hear them when they woke up and began moving around. On this particular morning, however, the house remained unusually quiet, even as the day progressed beyond the time when Lilly and Jack normally stirred. It was the silence that first alerted Maleha that something might be amiss. As any parent knows, when children are awake and active, there is usually some level of noise and activity that indicates their presence. The absence of these normal sounds created an unsettling feeling that prompted her to check on the children. The discovery that Lilly and Jack were not in their bedroom sent immediate panic through the household. A quick search of the interior rooms confirmed that the children were nowhere inside the house, leading to the terrifying realization that they must have somehow gotten outside without anyone noticing. The sliding back door, which was known to open silently, appeared to be the most likely exit point. The family had always been vigilant about supervising the children when they played outside, knowing that the surrounding woods could be dangerous for young children to explore alone. The timeline of events that morning would later become a crucial focus of the investigation, with authorities working to determine exactly when the children had disappeared and what might have motivated them to leave the safety of their home. The moment Maleha Brooks Murray realized her children were missing, panic set in with devastating intensity. Her immediate response was to conduct a frantic search of their property, calling out their names and checking every possible hiding place where 6-year-old Lilly and 4-year-old Jack might have gone to play. Daniel Martell joined the search, and together they scoured their yard and the immediate perimeter of their home. The couple called out repeatedly for the children, hoping to hear their voices responding from somewhere nearby. As minutes turned into what felt like hours, the awful reality began to sink in that this was not a simple case of children hiding or playing an extended game. At approximately 10 o'clock in the morning, Maleha made the call that would change everything. Her voice shaking with fear and desperation, she contacted 911 to report that her children were missing. The emergency dispatcher immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation, particularly given the rural location and the ages of the missing children. The initial response was swift and comprehensive. Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers arrived on scene within a remarkably short time, given the remote location of the Sullivan home. These first responders immediately began establishing protocols for what would quickly escalate into one of the most extensive search operations in Nova Scotia's recent history. The characteristics of the terrain surrounding the Sullivan home presented immediate challenges for search teams. The dense woodland that bordered their property consisted of thick brush, fallen trees from previous storms, and natural obstacles that would make navigation difficult even for experienced adults. For young children, this environment could quickly become overwhelming and dangerous. Emergency responders wasted no time in dispatching canine units to the scene. These specially trained search dogs would play a crucial role in the early hours of the investigation, using their superior scent detection abilities to try to pick up any trace of where Lilly and Jack might have gone. Within the first few hours of the search, something significant occurred that would become a key piece of evidence in the case. Emergency responders, communicating over radio channels, mentioned that a canine unit was being dispatched to investigate a blanket that had been found in the area. According to radio communications that were later made public, an official reported that families brought us to a location there not far away, that there is a piece of a blanket which the mother says she believes belongs to her daughter, just off the road here. This blanket fragment was later confirmed by Daniel Martell to be a piece of Lilly's blanket. The discovery of this evidence was particularly significant because it was found on Lansdowne Road, near the location where searchers also discovered what appeared to be a child-sized boot print. This boot print was located in the area of a pipeline trail, just over 1 kilometer from the children's home, suggesting that they may have traveled much farther than initially expected. The presence of these clues provided the first concrete indication that the children had indeed left their home and traveled some distance along the road. However, it also raised troubling questions about how two young children on the autism spectrum had managed to navigate such terrain and what might have motivated them to travel so far from home. As word of the missing children spread through the community, volunteers began arriving to assist with the search efforts. Local residents who knew the area well offered their knowledge of the terrain, while others simply wanted to help in any way possible. The response from the community was immediate and overwhelming, demonstrating the deep concern that people felt for Lilly and Jack. Search and rescue teams from across the region were mobilized to join the effort. These specialized units brought expertise in wilderness search techniques, advanced equipment, and the experience necessary to conduct systematic searches of challenging terrain. Helicopters and drones were deployed to provide aerial surveillance of the area, offering a perspective that ground teams could not achieve. The thick canopy of the forest made visibility difficult, but these aerial assets provided valuable assistance in coordinating ground search efforts and identifying areas that required more intensive investigation. The search area was systematically divided into sections, with each team assigned specific zones to cover thoroughly. Pink and orange ribbons were tied to trees to mark areas that had been searched, creating a visual record of the comprehensive effort being undertaken. Despite the immediate and intensive response, the first day of searching yielded frustratingly few concrete clues beyond the blanket fragment and boot print. The children seemed to have vanished into the vast wilderness that surrounded their home, leaving searchers grappling with the enormous challenge of covering such expansive and difficult terrain. While search teams continued their intensive efforts to locate Lilly and Jack, a different kind of investigation was beginning behind the scenes. Royal Canadian Mounted Police detectives understood that in cases involving missing children, they needed to examine every aspect of the family's background and relationships to determine if there were any factors that might be relevant to the disappearance. It was during these initial interviews that one of the most shocking aspects of the Sullivan family situation began to emerge. The children's family structure was far more complicated than most people in the community realized, involving secrets that had been carefully hidden for years. In the early morning hours of May 3rd, just one day after the children disappeared, two police cars with flashing red and blue lights pulled into the driveway of a home on Nova Scotia's eastern shore. Inside that house lived 62-year-old Belinda Gray, and the officers were there because of a connection that few people knew existed. Belinda Gray was the paternal grandmother of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, but she had been completely cut off from their lives for nearly 2 years before their disappearance. The officers woke her up to ask about her son, 29-year-old Cody Sullivan, who was the biological father of the missing children. When Gray answered the door that morning, she already suspected why the police were there. Her son Cody was living with her at the time, having lost his construction job, apartment and vehicle 9 months earlier. The officers wanted to know when he had last seen the children and needed to confirm that Lilly and Jack were not at their grandmother's house. What the police discovered during these initial interviews revealed a family secret that was both heartbreaking and potentially significant to the investigation. Cody Sullivan, the biological father of the missing children, had not seen Lilly and Jack for 3 years. He had completely walked away from their lives following a bitter custody dispute with their mother. According to Belinda Gray, her son had been in a relationship with Malaya Brooks Murray for approximately 3 years. During that time, Gray believed they were the picture-perfect family and had developed a close relationship with both Malaya and the children. However, the relationship between Cody and Malaya began to deteriorate as problems developed between them. When Malaya decided to end the relationship, the situation became complicated by the presence of 2 young children who needed stability and support. Rather than working to maintain his relationship with Lilly and Jack despite the end of his romantic relationship with their mother, Cody made a decision that would haunt the family for years to come. Malaya petitioned the court for sole custody of the children, a move that apparently triggered Cody's complete withdrawal from their lives. According to his mother, when faced with the custody proceedings, Cody simply said he was done and didn't want no part of it. He chose to walk away entirely rather than fight for his parental rights or maintain any relationship with his children. This abandonment was particularly devastating because it affected not only the children's relationship with their father, but also their connection to their paternal grandmother. Belinda Gray had maintained a loving relationship with Lilly and Jack, even after her son's relationship with their mother ended, but this arrangement became increasingly difficult as time passed. Initially, Malaya had no objections to Gray maintaining contact with the children. Anytime we wanted to see the kids, she would come by for a visit, She would bring them by all the time, Gray recalled. This arrangement allowed the children to maintain their connection to their father's side of the family, even though Cody himself had chosen to disappear from their lives. However, when Malaya moved in with her new partner, Daniel Martel, the dynamics changed significantly. Contact between Gray and her grandchildren gradually diminished and eventually stopped completely. The last time Gray saw Lilly and Jack was nearly 2 years before their disappearance, creating a painful gap in what had once been a close relationship. The impact of this family secret extended far beyond the adults involved. Lilly and Jack had lost not only their biological father, but also their connection to his family, including a grandmother who clearly loved them deeply. Gray would later describe Lilly as her little dream girl and spoke of Jack's serious, studious nature with obvious affection. For Belinda Gray, the children's disappearance represented not just a tragedy, but also a profound sense of loss and regret. She had been excluded from their lives for nearly 2 years, missing crucial developmental milestones and the opportunity to maintain the close relationship she had once shared with them. The family secret also raised questions about whether the complicated family dynamics might have played a role in the children's disappearance. Had the absence of their biological father created emotional difficulties for Lilly and Jack? Did the loss of their relationship with their paternal grandmother affect their sense of security and belonging? These questions would become increasingly important as the investigation progressed, and authorities worked to understand every possible factor that might explain why 2 young children would leave the safety of their home and venture into dangerous wilderness terrain. As the search for Lilly and Jack entered its 2nd week with no significant breakthroughs, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation began to take on characteristics that suggested authorities were considering possibilities beyond a simple case of children wandering off and getting lost. The scope and intensity of the police response indicated that investigators were treating this as a potentially criminal matter from very early in the process. Nearly a dozen Royal Canadian Mounted Police units were assigned to the case, representing a level of resource allocation that suggested serious concerns about what might have happened to the children. One of the most telling indicators of the investigation's direction was the decision to conduct formal interviews with 54 different people connected to the family or the case. This extensive interview process represented far more than a routine missing persons investigation and suggested that authorities were systematically examining every possible angle and connection. Even more significantly, some of these individuals were asked to submit to polygraph tests, a tool typically reserved for investigations where authorities suspect criminal activity may have occurred. The use of polygraph testing indicated that investigators had concerns about the truthfulness of statements they had received from certain individuals. Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather, voluntarily offered to take a polygraph test early in the investigation. He understood that as the adult male living in the home where the children disappeared, he would naturally become a focus of investigative attention. The stepfather is always a prime suspect right off the beginning, Martel acknowledged in later interviews. The polygraph test that Martel underwent was conducted approximately 3 weeks after the children's disappearance. He described sitting in a large chair with sensory pads placed under his forearms, buttocks and feet, while investigators asked him a series of pointed questions about his involvement in the case. According to Martel, the questions he was asked were particularly disturbing because they all presumed that the children were no longer alive. Rather than asking whether he knew where Lilly and Jack were, or whether he had seen them leave the house, investigators asked questions such as, "Did you kill Lilly and Jack? And are you an accessory to the murder of Lilly and Jack?" The nature of these questions provided insight into investigators' thinking about the case. None of the polygraph questions assumed that the children had been abducted by strangers or that they were still alive somewhere. Instead, the questions focused on the possibility that someone close to the family had been involved in harming them. Martel reported that he was informed immediately after the test that he had passed. According to his account, the investigator told him, "You did a good job, you passed." However, the fact that such testing was considered necessary indicated the level of suspicion that surrounded the case. The children's biological father, Cody Sullivan, and grandmother, Belinda Gray, were also interviewed by police, though Gray indicated that they were not asked to take polygraph tests. These interviews were conducted at different times and with varying levels of intensity as investigators worked to understand the complex family dynamics involved. Gray described being questioned for 2 hours while her son was interviewed for an hour and a half in a police vehicle. She expressed understanding about the need for these interviews, and even wished they had been conducted sooner, but her son found the experience more troubling and felt that police were treating him as though he had done something wrong. Another significant development in the investigation was the revelation that the children had been captured on surveillance footage the day before their disappearance. This footage showed Lilly, Jack, their mother Malaya, stepfather Daniel, and baby sister Meadow at a store near Highland Square Mall in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. The existence of this surveillance footage became important for establishing a timeline of the children's movements and confirming their presence with family members on May 1st. However, it also raised questions about the family's activities in the hours leading up to the disappearance. The investigation also revealed that Lilly and Jack had been absent from school for several days before their disappearance. They had last attended Salt Springs Elementary School on April 29th, with Martel explaining that they were kept home due to illness on April 30th and May 1st. This pattern of school absences added another layer of complexity to the timeline and raised questions about whether there had been any unusual circumstances in the days leading up to the children's disappearance. Police also conducted extensive searches of the family's property and home, going so far as to use drones to examine areas underneath the house. These searches were thorough and systematic, indicating that investigators were leaving no stone unturned in their efforts to find evidence. The level of cooperation that Martel provided to authorities was notable. He not only volunteered for polygraph testing, but also encouraged police to search the family's property, provided his cell phone and banking information, and made himself available for multiple interviews. Despite this cooperation, the investigation continued to intensify rather than narrow its focus, suggesting that authorities remained concerned about various possibilities and had not ruled out criminal activity in connection with the children's disappearance. The devastating impact of Lilly and Jack's disappearance extended far beyond their immediate household to include family members who had been forced to love them from a distance. For Belinda Gray, the children's paternal grandmother, the tragedy was compounded by the painful reality that she had been separated from her grandchildren for nearly 2 years before they vanished. When Gray received the phone call on the afternoon of May 2nd, informing her that Lilly and Jack were missing, her initial reaction was disbelief mixed with desperate hope. I was in a state of panic, shock, but in the back of my mind I kept saying, "Well, they will find them," she recalled. Despite the complicated family dynamics that had kept her away from the children, Gray immediately drove to Pictou County the following day to join the search efforts. Her determination to help find Lilly and Jack demonstrated the depth of love she still felt for them, even after years of forced separation. Walking through the dense woods surrounding the Sullivan home, Gray called out desperately for the children, using the special names she had always used for them. "I am yelling for Lilly and Jack. We always called Jack Jackie Boy. His heritage is Irish," she said through tears, pausing to compose herself as she recalled those heartbreaking moments. The physical reality of searching the wilderness area quickly reinforced Gray's growing fears about what might have happened to her grandchildren. "I started to feel that I cannot see them being in the woods. There are trees everywhere. You literally have to climb over trees, climb under bushes. It is really, really thick," she observed. As an adult with full mobility and awareness, Gray found the terrain challenging and often treacherous. The idea that 2 young children on the autism spectrum could have successfully navigated such difficult conditions seemed increasingly unlikely the more time she spent in the search area. Over 6 days of intensive searching, Gray witnessed the extraordinary efforts being made to locate Lilly and Jack. Helicopters flew overhead while drones surveyed areas that ground teams could not easily access. Search and rescue volunteers worked tirelessly, marking off searched areas with pink and orange ribbons tied to trees throughout the forest. The thoroughness of the search effort was both impressive and heartbreaking. Gray could see evidence of the systematic approach being taken, with clearly marked zones indicating where teams had already conducted their searches. You could see places around where they played, and you could see places around where you might want to explore as a kid, she noted. However, this very thoroughness began to erode Gray's hope that her grandchildren would be found alive. Beyond those exploration points, there is no reason for any child to wander deep into the woods, she concluded, recognizing that the search had covered all the logical places where children might have gone to play or explore. Gray's relationship with Lilly had been particularly special. She described her granddaughter as her little dream girl and cherished memories of Lily's distinctive appearance and personality. "I loved that she had the brown hair, and she had a space between her teeth, which I had when I was a kid," Gray remembered fondly. "She was our little princess." Jack had captured his grandmother's heart in a different but equally profound way. Even as a baby, he had displayed a serious, contemplative nature that set him apart. You could tickle him, and he would look at you ever so serious, like he was really studying you, Gray recalled with obvious affection. The pain of losing contact with these beloved children for nearly 2 years before their disappearance added an extra dimension of grief to Gray's experience. She had missed countless precious moments, holidays, birthdays, and developmental milestones that she would never be able to recover. As the days and weeks passed without any sign of Lilly and Jack, Gray found herself facing a horrible reality that she struggled to accept. The combination of the extensive search efforts yielding no results and her knowledge of the dangerous terrain led her to a heartbreaking conclusion. "My heart tells me these babies are gone," Gray finally admitted, her voice breaking with emotion. This statement represented not just a grandmother's intuition, but also her rational assessment of the circumstances surrounding the children's disappearance. Despite her growing certainty that Lilly and Jack would not be found alive, Gray remained committed to keeping their case in the public eye. "I just want them back," she said simply. "These are everybody's grandchildren. They are not just mine now. It does seem like the whole world cares." The grandmother's decision to speak publicly about the case represented both an act of love and a plea for justice. By sharing her family's complicated history and her own heartbreak, Gray hoped to maintain pressure on authorities to continue their investigation and to ensure that Lilly and Jack would not be forgotten. Her willingness to reveal painful family secrets, including her son's abandonment of his children and the custody battles that had torn the family apart, demonstrated her commitment to finding answers regardless of the personal cost. As weeks turned into months without any breakthrough in locating Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation evolved into something far more complex and comprehensive than a typical missing persons case. The involvement of multiple national agencies signaled that authorities were treating this as a matter of the highest priority. The National Center for Missing Persons joined the investigation, bringing specialized expertise in cases involving disappeared children. This federal agency provided additional resources and analytical capabilities that complemented the extensive local search efforts. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection also became involved, adding another layer of specialized knowledge to the investigation. The participation of these national organizations indicated that the case had escalated beyond a local missing persons matter into something with broader implications. Corporal Sandy Matharu, who led the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Major Crimes Unit for Northeast Nova Scotia, acknowledged that the investigation was processing a significant volume of information from a variety of sources. This statement suggested that authorities were receiving and analyzing evidence and tips from multiple directions. The methodical approach being taken by investigators was evident in Matharu's description of their process. "We have a very coordinated and deliberate approach to make certain all information is meticulously scrutinized, prioritized, and actioned to ensure nothing is missed," she explained. This careful, systematic methodology indicated that investigators were building a comprehensive case file that would stand up to scrutiny regardless of what conclusions they eventually reached. Every piece of information was being documented and analyzed to ensure that no potential leads were overlooked. The public response to the case had been overwhelming, with over 500 tips received from people across Nova Scotia and beyond. Each of these tips required investigation and follow-up, creating a massive workload for the investigative team. Corporal Guillaume Tremblay, speaking for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, acknowledged the challenges involved in processing such a volume of information. Whether it is a tip that indicates that there could be something that happened elsewhere in the province, elsewhere in the country, we have to follow up on those investigative tips to rule them out, he explained. The fact that no confirmed sightings of the children had emerged despite hundreds of tips and extensive publicity was itself significant. In many missing children cases, credible sightings help establish direction and focus for search efforts. The absence of any reliable sightings suggested either that the children had not traveled far from their home area or that they were no longer visible to the public. One of the most telling aspects of the investigation was the continued emphasis on treating every missing persons case as suspicious until proven otherwise. Tremblay repeatedly emphasized this point, suggesting that authorities had not ruled out criminal activity, despite the initial assumption that the children had simply wandered off. The investigation had also revealed some concerning timeline discrepancies that required further examination. The confirmation that Lilly and Jack had been seen in public with family members on May 1st, just one day before they were reported missing, narrowed the window of their disappearance and raised questions about the sequence of events. Police had specifically requested additional video footage from the area along Gallock Road between April 28th and May 2nd, indicating that they were trying to piece together a detailed timeline of movements in the days leading up to the disappearance. The fact that authorities were seeking surveillance footage from a 4-day period suggested that they believed the children's disappearance might have been preceded by other significant events or activities that could be relevant to understanding what happened. The investigation had also expanded to include extensive searches of infrastructure and underground areas that might not have been immediately obvious. Police confirmed that they had searched wells, mine shafts, septic systems, and conducted underwater searches of local lakes. These types of searches indicated that investigators were considering the possibility that the children might have encountered some form of accident, or that their remains might be located in areas that would not be immediately visible to searchers. The decision to offer a $150,000 reward for information leading to the children's whereabouts represented a significant escalation in the case. This substantial sum indicated both the seriousness with which authorities were treating the matter and their recognition that public assistance might be crucial to solving it. The reward was offered through Nova Scotia's major unsolved crimes program, which the province described as a tool to help police in major unsolved crime cases. The designation of the Sullivan case as part of this program provided official confirmation that authorities now considered it an unsolved crime, rather than simply a missing persons matter. Throughout all of these developments, the children's mother, Maleha Brooks Murray, remained silent on the advice of police. Her decision not to speak publicly, while understandable from an investigative standpoint, added to the mystery and speculation surrounding the case. The continued cooperation of Daniel Martel stood in contrast to the mother's silence. Martel continued to make himself available for interviews and maintained his position that he had nothing to hide regarding the children's disappearance. As the investigation into Lilly and Jack Sullivan's disappearance stretched beyond the 2-month mark, more questions seemed to emerge than answers. The case had captured international attention, yet fundamental aspects of what happened on May 2, 2025, remained frustratingly unclear. One of the most perplexing aspects of the entire situation was the absence of any concrete evidence indicating what direction the children had traveled after leaving their home. Despite the discovery of Lilly's blanket fragment and a child-sized boot print, searchers had been unable to establish a clear trail that would indicate where the children had gone. The terrain surrounding the Sullivan home presented enormous challenges for any comprehensive search effort. The dense woodlands, fallen trees from previous storms, and thick underbrush created countless potential hiding places, while simultaneously making systematic searching extremely difficult. Amy Hansen, who served as search manager for 10 operational search periods, described conditions where search teams could be close enough to touch fingertips, but unable to see each other through the thick brush. This reality highlighted the possibility that Lilly and Jack could be located very close to areas that had already been searched without being detected. Hansen's 22 years of experience in search and rescue operations provided important perspective on the case. She described the effort to find Lilly and Jack as pretty much unheard of in this province and by far the biggest search she had ever been involved with during her extensive career. The cumulative 12,000 hours that search and rescue teams had spent combing through the forests around Lansdowne Station represented an extraordinary commitment of resources and volunteer time. Yet despite this massive effort, no significant additional evidence had been discovered beyond the initial blanket fragment and boot print. The psychological toll on search volunteers had become evident as the operation continued without success. Hansen noted that there were members that could not bring themselves to call the names of the children, indicating how emotionally difficult the search had become for those involved. The decision to scale back the wider ground search after May 7th did not mean that efforts to locate the children had ended. Targeted searches continued to take place based on new information or tips received by investigators, but the massive volunteer mobilization that had characterized the first week was no longer sustainable. Daniel Martel had expressed his desire to see cadaver dogs brought in to search the woods surrounding his home. These specially trained animals are capable of detecting the scent of human remains and might be able to locate evidence that traditional search methods had missed. However, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police confirmed that cadaver dogs had not been deployed as part of the investigation. Their statement that any searches involving the dog will be based on information gathered through the ongoing investigation suggested that authorities had specific reasons for not utilizing this resource. The absence of cadaver dogs from the search effort raised questions about what investigators knew or suspected about the case that had not been made public. If authorities believed the children were still alive or had been abducted, the use of cadaver dogs would not be appropriate. However, if they suspected the children had died in the woods, these animals could provide valuable assistance. The family dynamics that had been revealed during the investigation continued to raise questions about whether psychological factors might have played a role in the children's disappearance. The absence of their biological father for 3 years and the loss of contact with their paternal grandmother for nearly 2 years represented significant disruptions in the children's family relationships. Whether these family circumstances had created emotional distress for Lilly and Jack that might have influenced their behavior on May 2nd remained an open question. Children on the autism spectrum can be particularly sensitive to changes in their family environment, and the complicated custody history might have affected their sense of security. The timeline discrepancies that had emerged during the investigation also continued to generate questions. The confirmation that the children had been seen in public on May 1st provided a narrower window for their disappearance, but it also raised questions about their activities and emotional state in the hours immediately before they vanished. The children's absence from school on April 30th and May 1st, attributed to illness, added another element to the timeline that investigators needed to verify and understand. Whether the children had actually been ill, or whether there had been other reasons for keeping them home from school, remained unclear. The surveillance footage from Highland Square Mall that captured the family together on May 1st represented the last confirmed sighting of Lilly and Jack. Analysis of this footage and the family's behavior during that shopping trip might provide insights into the children's emotional state and family dynamics in their final hours. The continued silence of Maleha Brooks Murray, while understandable from a legal standpoint, meant that crucial information about the children's behavior and the family's activities remained unavailable to the public. Her perspective as their mother, and the last person to see them, could potentially provide vital clues about what motivated them to leave the house. The international attention that the case had received brought both benefits and challenges. While the widespread publicity increased the chances that someone with relevant information would come forward, it also generated numerous false leads and conspiracy theories that investigators had to waste time investigating. As summer arrived in Nova Scotia and the search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan entered its 3rd month, the case had fundamentally transformed from a missing persons investigation into something far more complex and troubling. The initial hope that the children would be quickly found safe had given way to a grim reality that seemed to offer no easy answers. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police continued to maintain their official position that every missing persons investigation is considered suspicious until proven otherwise, but their actions and resource allocation clearly indicated that this had become a criminal investigation in all but name. The involvement of multiple national agencies, the extensive polygraph testing, the systematic interviews of 54 individuals, and the eventual classification of the case under Nova Scotia's major unsolved crimes program all pointed to a case that authorities now viewed as involving potential criminal activity. Yet despite months of intensive investigation and the expenditure of enormous resources, fundamental questions about what happened to Lilly and Jack remained unanswered. The children had seemingly vanished without leaving behind sufficient evidence to determine their fate or identify those responsible for their disappearance. The $150,000 reward offered by the Nova Scotia government represented one of the largest rewards in the province's history for information about a missing persons case. This substantial sum indicated both the seriousness with which authorities viewed the matter and their recognition that solving the case might require information from members of the public. For the community of Lansdowne Station and the broader Pictou County area, the unsolved disappearance had created a lasting sense of unease and vulnerability. The possibility that 2 young children could vanish without a trace from their own home challenged fundamental assumptions about safety and security in rural Nova Scotia. The extensive search efforts had demonstrated the extraordinary commitment of volunteers and professional searchers who had donated thousands of hours to the effort to locate Lilly and Jack. Yet the failure to find any trace of the children despite this massive undertaking suggested that conventional search methods might not be sufficient to solve this particular mystery. The family secrets that had been revealed during the investigation provided crucial context for understanding the complicated dynamics surrounding the children's lives. The biological father's complete abandonment of his children, the custody battles, and the grandmother's forced separation from her grandchildren all created a web of relationships and emotions that might have played a role in their disappearance. Belinda Gray's heartbreaking certainty that her grandchildren were gone reflected not just a grandmother's intuition, but also a rational assessment of the circumstances. Her willingness to speak publicly about painful family secrets demonstrated her commitment to finding answers, even if those answers brought more pain. Daniel Martel's continued cooperation with authorities and his apparent willingness to submit to polygraph testing suggested either complete innocence or sophisticated calculation. His description of his life being ripped apart in 1,000 pieces conveyed the personal toll that the investigation and public scrutiny had taken on him and his family. The silence maintained by Maleha Brooks Murray on the advice of police meant that crucial information about the children's final hours and their mother's perspective on what might have happened remained hidden from public view. Whether this silence was protecting the investigation or protecting individuals involved in the case remained unclear. The case had also highlighted gaps in the systems designed to protect children and respond to their disappearance. The decision not to issue an Amber Alert had generated controversy and raised questions about the criteria used to determine when such alerts are appropriate. The revelation that the children had been absent from school for several days before their disappearance raised questions about whether there had been warning signs that might have indicated problems in the home or with the children's well-being. The international attention that the case had received brought both opportunities and challenges. While the widespread publicity increased the chances that someone with relevant information would come forward, it also attracted conspiracy theorists and amateur investigators whose speculation sometimes obscured more than it illuminated. For investigators, the challenge of maintaining the integrity of their investigation while managing public expectations and media attention represented an ongoing balancing act. The need to preserve the confidentiality of evidence and witness statements had to be weighed against the public's desire for information and transparency. The case had also demonstrated the limitations of even the most extensive search efforts when conducted in challenging terrain. The dense forests of Nova Scotia could conceal evidence for years or decades, making it possible that crucial clues about Lilly and Jack's fate might never be discovered through conventional searching. As the investigation continued into an uncertain future, the fundamental questions that had emerged in the first hours after the children's disappearance remained unanswered. What had motivated two young children to leave the safety of their home? How had they managed to disappear so completely that months of intensive searching had failed to locate any trace of them? Perhaps most troubling of all, if the family secrets that had been revealed during the investigation had played a role in the children's disappearance, what did that mean for other families dealing with similar custody disputes, abandonment, and broken relationships? The truth about what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan remained hidden somewhere in the dense forests of Nova Scotia, in the complicated relationships between their family members, or in the minds of individuals who had not yet chosen to share what they knew with authorities. Until that truth emerged, the case would continue to haunt, not just those who loved the children, but also the broader community that had watched in horror as two innocent lives seemingly vanished without explanation. The $150,000 reward stood as both an incentive for information and a symbol of a province's commitment to finding answers, no matter how long it might take. For Belinda Gray, who had been forced to love her grandchildren from a distance and now faced the possibility that she might never see them again, the case represented both personal tragedy and a broader failure of the systems designed to protect children and preserve family relationships. The investigation into the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan continued, driven by the hope that somewhere someone possessed the information needed to finally provide answers about what happened to these two innocent children on that fateful morning in May. Whether those answers would bring closure or only deeper questions remained to be seen, but the commitment to finding the truth remained unwavering. If you found this case as devastating and mysterious as we did, make sure to subscribe to Criminal Mind Cortex for more incredible true crime investigations that reveal the hidden secrets behind the headlines. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest deep dives into the most compelling cases from around the world, where we examine not just what happened, but the complex family dynamics and human relationships that often hold the key to understanding these tragic events.